The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
So welcome back to TechBytes, day 2 actually here at HRC, Hotel, Restaurant, and Catering, as well as HT360, Hospitality Technology 360. And this time I get the opportunity to have a conversation with William Connors, who is the International Systems Manager of Starbucks on the international side, but he's in a new area, which we'll get into. But some of you may have seen the interview and the conversation that I did with Vikram, who's on our board, actually, in New York during NRF. So this probably is not going to be a Starbucks conversation. Maybe we should talk about everything but Starbucks, although that's very hard for me to do. So welcome to TechBytes anyway.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you know, they make that joke sometimes on like podcasts and things. They say, what, like long-time listener, first-time caller or something like that, right? Well, you were pointing out to me that actually, when was it that we first met?
I think it was back in 2013 when I was head of IT for Oaxaca, and you were getting a IFBTA team in London.
So it's been a while, but you're not originally from the UK.
Nope, I'm from Montreal by origin, Canada.
So does that mean you speak French then?
Yes.
So is that Quebecois?
Yes.
But Montreal, of course, is not Quebec, so I'm sort of mixing that one up a little bit, but you do speak French as well, right?
Yes, yeah.
So in your career, in what you've done, because you're with Starbucks now, but actually we've met you, I think you may have been in 2 or 3 positions since we first met, right? But what brought you first to the UK? Why did you come here?
Well, that's it. It's a long and windy trail, but I was a food and beverage manager working throughout the Caribbean. And I was working for Club Med, actually. And I moved from Club Med to Radisson, and I was in Belize. And I fixed all their systems because in Belize there's absolutely no tech support whatsoever. So I had to get my hands dirty and fix everything: the cabling, the point of sale, the PMS system. And every time that the system would crash, they were flying people in to fix it. And one day, I never had to call them anymore. And they're like, "Wow, why don't you come work for us? We need people like you." So then I got sent on projects doing Oracle work, but working with the U.S. military.
Are we talking about like Oracle Symphony or Opera or both? Or?
Back then it was Micros 3700 and 9700, which became Oracle. But yeah, so this company then shipped me out to everywhere Oracle doesn't want to go. So I did all the U.S. military bases. So I did Japan, Korea, all across the States. And then there was an emergency with the company and they said, we need you to come out to the UK. That was 2003. And
so was that working with Rick Kennedy by some chance?
Oh.
On the Oracle side?
Yeah.
And they had a product, they bought a company, I think it was M-Corp.
It was just doing a bunch of stuff, but I was actually out, and it's funny, looking at London, like it'd be like, I did it. So I spent 6 years living in a hotel and just went from hotel to hotel. And I thought I was going to come for 1 week, and it was 7 years at that job, and then I moved into the restaurant side.
But when you were doing the IT, the one thing I'm trying to piece together is, did you start on the operations side of hotels?
Yes.
And then you just happened to get into the technology system side?
Yeah, that's it. I was like food and beverage manager for Radisson. And then when I joined this company, I got retrained into the tech world. And then, was doing installations and support for Oracle. And then when I moved into restaurants, starting with Oaxaca, and I also worked for a bit with QSR Automations, which is an American company.
Right.
And just taking on all these different projects. And
let's see, Wingstop in there too.
Yes. Yeah.
So once so if I got this right, so you started you consider yourself starting in hotel operations, but it was hotel operations, food, beverage.
Yes.
Okay. And so it was food and beverage, not front office and not rooms. Okay. And so you did that. Did you go to hospitality school too?
Yes, I did. I went to hospitality school in Florida.
FIU?
No, it's called Schiller International University. It's since closed. It closed a couple of years ago, but it was in Dunedin for the longest time.
Okay, so we have a similar background because, I basically tell people I'm a restaurant manager who happens to be in tech, but I started my career very much in Marriott.
Oh, yeah.
But restaurants for Marriott, then Marriott hotels, then into technology for Marriott, and have a hospitality degree. So it's like sort of a very similar thing. Go-to person, right, that's doing the tech, and then they all of a sudden say, okay, why don't you do it? And then ran a group of people that did implementation and training. So they spent all their time in the road doing all kinds of different things. So that's interesting. Didn't know that. So, okay. So you've done a number of different things. So, and you have the supplier side in there too, which I may have forgotten that. So your perspective also, did you start in Canada? So you start in Canada in lodging?
Well, that's it. Yeah, I did a couple of years of doing hotels. I was with Fairmont in the
Which
Rocky
Marriott
Mountains.
eventually acquired.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then finished my hospitality degree. And then Club Med, it sounded like such a great job. They said,
you think so, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, they say, we're going to send you to Turks and Caicos. We'll send you to Cancun. And you live on a beach every day for as long as you want. I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
And then you're in the employee quarters.
Yes.
Okay. Not the hotel guest rooms, right? Okay, so we get that. All right, so you have a perspective that cuts across hotels, restaurants, the vendor side, all of it. So, I guess if we take a look at that journey, are there certain things that during that period of time that just stand out in your memory?
Well, I mean, I think of where I was and where I am now, especially with feedback, because when I was in Club Med, the customers would come, they would have a great time, they go home, they get a letter in the post box saying, how was your trip? They fill it out, it goes to the head office in Florida. Eventually it works back to the resort. So the general manager of the resort said, Mr. Grimes had a terrible week, but I'm like, that was August and now it's like Christmas time. So I don't really know what to do with that, But the thing is now feedback is sped up so quickly that can still catch you in the restaurant. You could have a questionnaire given to you, like by mobile app or whatever, saying how did you find the food? And it's not just the food was bad. It's you had beef tacos, chicken wings, and fries, and you said, I loved the beef tacos. I didn't like the fries. Why? And then you can say it's cold. So it's much more timely, much more data-driven, and I think
of course, the best timing is if you can get somebody while they're actually in the unit, right? The problem with that is that even with your current employer, because I get some of those surveys from time to time, you're getting it after the visit, right?
Yes.
Not while you're there. Now, of course, Starbucks would be different because you may or may not be sitting there. So, but even in restaurants, sort of the holy grail kind of thing was to get that feedback while the person's there. And they've tried everything for that because the person may not take their phone out if they're sitting in a full service. They may, but if you're using something like a tableside kiosk of sorts, you can try to get it there. But I'm not so sure that we still have mastered the ability to get somebody to react and give a response while they're there if they're not happy with something while you're there to correct it.
Yeah. I mean, there's technology now where if you have a negative comment, it'll automatically send an alert to the manager. And if the manager is on the ball, they'll actually see, okay, the person at table 20 is unhappy, and then you can come over and find a way to save the customer, because if you have an unhappy customer, they'll tell, I think it's on average 8 or 10 different people, but you'll never get that customer again. So if you can find a way to fix what went wrong right away, then it actually turns a negative into a positive.
So I realized that we could go down the rabbit hole now talking about the customer. I think we're going to come back to it because there's some, when we talk about data, there's some ways maybe that's more predictive that you don't need the customer always to tell you. So what else? So you said, okay, so the customer response. So there are other things that you just see during the journey here that maybe we finally gotten to or that were aha moments?
Well, there's customer journey, but also too, when you're talking about hotels, everything now is far more data-driven and you can save electricity, you can save on power. So I can remember that people would go out and they'd leave their air conditioner on with their door wide open the entire day, and you're just burning electricity. And in the Caribbean, it's times 10 because it's very scarce resources. So now what it is you can say, okay, there's nobody in that room, or they're checking in at 3, and so you can start everything up at 2:45, and no one's the wiser. So
or just started up when they're coming into the room, right?
Yeah.
And then so energy management. But the interesting thing about that is if you look at the food and beverage industry and restaurants, only now do we seem to be getting towards the connected kitchen, where all the device, because a lot of that old device, the old devices sit around forever, and they finally discovered. So somebody told me this in last year that if it has a port, there's a journey, because I know by walking around this show, right?
Yeah.
They told me a couple of years ago that if it has a screen on it, it can communicate. So for 2 years, I go around telling people if it's got a digital screen, it can communicate, meaning that it's probably on the internet or it's doing whatever, right? Then last year, somebody came out with a device. They said, no. If it has a serial port on it, we now have a device to turn that serial port into something that can communicate.
Yep.
And so that's the secret to all this old equipment, fryers and whatever it is, turning the old equipment into communicating. So I think maybe the food and beverage industry was lagging behind lodging, which understood a connected room, energy management, putting the pieces together.
Well, also too, looking at restaurants and coffee shops, what have you, you have a connected kitchen which automatically does preventative maintenance. So in many brands that I've worked at, the Coca-Cola guy would show up and he says, "I'm here to fix the Coca-Cola machine." And I'm kind of like, all right, who called you? Because you're kind of like... there's also the security and PCI complex as well. And they say, no, the machine sends an alert saying this is about to break, and so we're fixing it in advance.
So look, I'm really glad that you actually came up with that particular example. So I think we're going to change our conversation a little bit, and maybe we're going to brainstorm some stuff. So I'm going to give you an example, and then maybe we could just sort of brainstorm, what do we do with this? Because you work it day in and day out. And what I've discovered is that new technology sometimes is produced by people that are outside our industry, but no tech. So I always ask them, what was your motivation? They tell me I was sitting in a bar somewhere and the bartender complained. Okay. Then you ask them, did you actually look that up and see if it existed, right? We get that, right? But also sometimes we're in the weeds with what we do and we don't see or don't think outside of what you can do. So here's my example. So, because you brought up about the maintenance. And I will tell you that every supplier in the world that has any kind of equipment that's connected, your Coke example, will tell you that if you're going to run out, great. If it needs maintenance, great. The fryers, the equipment, the refrigerators, even the computers, they self-heal or they tell you when they're failing. They're about to fail so that you can do it. That was the selling point.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a guy who had a machine from Kraft Heinz. And it's sort of like the Coca-Cola free pour, the freestyle, whatever, that's doing the different flavors, right? And they're essentially doing that for the Heinz, sauces, ketchups and sauces. And so they have a machine, and it has 7 compartments in it, but it can make 147 flavors by mixing them. But what it does is drops in a little cup, shakes it to mix it.
Yeah.
Because you got to mix it, right? So it drops, mix. Okay, great. Now you get the idea. So I'm sitting on stage with them. I said, so that machine's connected. That's really great. What do you do with it? He goes, well, we know when it's going to run out because you don't want anybody to run out of sauce, right?
Yep.
And we can do maintenance on it, self-cleaning. I said, well, you make 147 flavors. So I guess you know how many times each one of those flavors is done from your 7 cartridges.
Yep.
Yeah, we do. I said, have you ever thought about sharing that data with somebody? Because you actually could tell them regionally what kind of flavor profile their customers are getting.
Yep.
Okay, so using that as an example. So what are the things that you've seen out there that maybe we haven't thought about, and we can just tee it up and talk about it and say, what if it was done this way or that? Because we have this data, but in your Coke example, they only use the data for what they do.
Yep.
Even the connected kitchen guys, a lot of times are just connecting their own equipment for maintenance reasons.
Yeah.
But they're not thinking about how, when it comes together with other stuff.
Wow. I mean, there's so many different areas. Okay, there's maintenance and, fire prevention if the deep fat fryer goes above a certain temperature or something. But there's all that. But one of the things that I've seen, which is quite exciting for me, is how CCTV can interact with all these different products. So you can have your CCTV send an alert if the freezer door is left open, or if there's a trip hazard, or if, let's say, I'm a terrible employee and I leave my stuff all over the place, but you're a good employee and you have everything fine. You can actually turn that into a teachable moment and say, this is an example. And also, too, you got workflows as well. I've been in so many restaurants where the staff are just trying to do their jobs. But if you look at it from an analytical perspective, what you can see is that they're running up and down. So what do you go, okay, perhaps we should rejig our setup a little bit so people don't have to run up and down and do the same thing again and again, because you want to be efficient.
Okay, so you get how this game is played. So, since we're now doing a game show,
Yeah.
right? So we're just going to take a quick break, but I want to come back to this because I think you've now teed up another subject on this, and so let's just drill down and do that. So I'm with William Connors, who is the International Technology and Systems Manager for Starbucks, but actually we've known each other 2013, was it?
Yeah.
2013, and just learned, of course, in the first part of this that he started his career actually in lodging side and how he got here to the UK from Canada, Montreal. And so we'll come back because we're really having a conversation about what we can do with what we have. So we'll be right back.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So welcome back to our second half. And I've got William Connors, who's here with me today from Starbucks. And we're talking about everything but Starbucks, by the way. So he's with Starbucks, and he's the International Technology and Systems Manager for Starbucks. And we were talking about some of the data, but what we were really talking about was some of the things that we see that are out there that maybe we could take advantage. So the last example you were using, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll translate. I don't speak Quebecois and I don't speak French, but okay. So I'll translate a little bit here. But you were talking about how you can take some of the CCTV footage and you can take a look at people leaving stuff around and planograms, they used to call it in the retail industry. So seeing how many steps and how people do it, they used to have to set up a whole kitchen, move the stuff around, right? But what you're actually really talking about here is that we already have that footage.
Yes.
So you're talking about taking existing footage, not actually, I assume that's,
yes.
Yeah, not exactly taking new cameras and things, which you used to have to do. You had to set up cameras, right, to do this stuff, and turning it into, taking that and feeding it into something that may be looking for specific types of things, whether it's the steps or whether it's training or whether it's timing, right? So what kinds of things do you think people could do besides that, when they have their surveillance camera footage?
Well, one key thing that I've used it in previous roles is people counting outside. So when the owner of our company said, I'd love to know how many people walk by every day, because they were looking at whether or not to put digital signage in, or relate the information to suppliers, to help co-fund it. And they're like, oh, we should get a consultant and whatever. It's like, the CCTV, bang, we just drew an imaginary line, and we knew right away that there was 6,000 people going in one direction, 7,000 going in the other direction, and it's actual data, And also, too, there's a lot of places, especially QSR, you have like a bunch of people in a line. But these people say, the line's too long, I'm going to leave. And so
and everybody's got cameras on those lines.
Well, that's
They got cameras in front, they got cameras on the lines, and we should have learned this, of course, by all the people who think they're going to get away with crime. And then we realize there's cameras everywhere, okay? So, all right, so you have the line.
Yeah, well, that's it. And so you can actually draw an imaginary line and break it up and say, okay, when the line is this much, these people leave. If the line is longer, the more and more people leave. Because how can you otherwise track lost sales? If you have sales in the point of sale, then okay, you can track those actual sales and stuff, but you want to find out how many people did you have the opportunity to sell and then lost it. So you're using existing equipment, but that's a key metric that you can't get in other reports.
Yeah, and people don't realize how much, if we were in a community that would share, look, I'm sure the people that do site location things, somehow you can log in to some of the cameras that are in communities and stuff. You can watch intersections, so you can start doing those counts too to figure out where to place your store, where to do I'm sure, by the way, some of this already exists. The problem is that there's so many of these individual silos that how do you connect that data with other data that's there? I get it. You can take the camera footage and you can do any sorts of things. We could probably have a conversation. All right, where are all the cameras? What data can you get off each one? Great. Okay, good. We can get that. But then what are the other systems that are there? They're collecting data, and what if you put them together?
Yes.
What would you come out with? I think that's probably where we failed today. That's how do you connect the dots?
Well, that's it. You need to have systems, and I think it's getting better, but systems that are willing to work with each other and integrate, because, you have some systems where they're like, they work well on itself, but the thing is it takes effort to make sure that your systems talk to others, and it's always it's not me, it's them, it's not, so I think that's an opportunity where if more and more systems are willing to work together, then the data and the overall efficiency is going to be so much better.
But to have that conversation, look, I don't know if some of your thinking and thoughts are because you did a stint with a supplier that was doing a piece, which gives you a different sort of thinking, right? But you're giving me sort of a thought that one of the things the IFPTA should do, because you've been involved with us, is maybe once a year we should do a think tank meeting, right? Yep. That each one sits there and puts out, because you have both suppliers and operators at the table at the same time. And if you put those thoughts together, right? So you could do a think tank and have each individual meeting come back and report on what new ideas or what ideas do they have for what we already have. Because it doesn't always have to cost new money, right? Yeah. Sometimes it's just using what you already have. And I bet you we would come up with some really interesting ideas that nobody thought of, but because they put their heads together with their mutual experience, they came up with it.
Yeah, and suppliers, if they want to sell their product, they need to make sure that the end users are benefiting the most. So it's kind of everybody wins,
Yeah, well, so I look to suppliers to knowing what's really happening, what's available in the technology marketplace. They should be the ones staying on top of, because not everybody's Starbucks, not everybody's the larger company. So, they should stay on top of what's going on in the tech world. They should be the ones bringing AI and other things to us, and we shouldn't actually have to talk about it because they really should be bringing and making it work. Because most restaurant operators and food service ones in the SMB, the smaller ones, not the huge scale enterprise that can afford to have data architects and everything, really need somebody to show them the way.
Yeah.
And so the suppliers bring that knowledge, but the operators know how to operate and what's changing with the customer and the guest. And so you really need those two pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, no matter where you are in the world, everyone is connected by the same problems. Rising labor costs, rising energy costs, rising food costs, and rising competition. So even though you might have listeners in the USA or Canada or the UK or wherever, we're all kind of linked by that common bond. And then the common challenge of how to make businesses more profitable, more efficient, and make best use of the team that you have.
Yeah, so I think that there's something in that, because we just don't get together that often, as groups of people, to really do the think tank approach or something. So that may be something to do. Now, I don't want to ignore the fact that you have international in your title, and you just brought up that, different parts of the world and things like that. I've always said to people that either you go to other industries or you go to another part of the world.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things are invented in other places. Is this your first international role?
Well,
yeah, you were in the hotels, but one where you're really choosing technology internationally. And
when I was with the Noble Group, they had a restaurant called Chatamate, and so they had one in Canada, two in the USA, one in Qatar, whatever, and so that was a bit international. But this is kind of the first time where I'm actually dealing with passionate people from different countries that have the same love of hospitality.
So, you're being afforded that. Obviously, Starbucks is a global organization. We don't really need to talk about Starbucks, but what I would like to know is what are your impressions, or now that you're in a role that is actually focusing on it, not the same systems. The hotel environment would be different because you expect the levels of service, the reservations to be taken a certain way, the people are coming from all. But when you're dealing in regional places and you're serving the local market, that's different, right? So what are you learning now? What are your observations now? Are there some aha moments that you've had that you just hadn't thought about?
Well, speaking about coffee in general and loyalty, when I was working with other brands that was more table service, you'd be hoping to get the customer back once every 3 months. But if you are a coffee customer, you're going to the same coffee place day in and day out, or at least 5 days a week.
3 times a day.
Yeah, well, 3 times a day. Wow.
3 ventis.
Yeah,
I should point out.
Wow, that's why you're so energetic. Yeah. No, but
early in the morning.
Yeah, but it's a real great opportunity to grow the loyalty. And every time you go in, it's so great. Well, they say, William, so nice to see you. With the loyalty, they recognize who you are, and just Starbucks in general. They take your name because you want to be recognized as a person, I used to be so frustrated. I won't mention the brand, but I was going to another coffee shop, and I would go there for like 2 years solid, and I'm like Mr. Flat White. No recognition, no sense of worth, and that's it. One of the things I noticed right away was when you go into Starbucks, they recognize who you are, they value you as a customer, and they get to know you, which I think is a great thing.
Well, we have a discussion. By the way, is your shirt intentionally green for a reason here?
Yeah, I figured it's probably on topic, but yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, it could be out there that way. So, okay. So, are there things that really sort of, you go like, why don't we have a solution for this? Like, it's so obvious, but why hasn't anybody invented something? Like, if you could just, I used to call them tech peeves.
Yeah.
But, is there something out there that you just wish that our industry would do, and you just don't know why we haven't solved this problem yet?
I mean, yes, not related to Starbucks by any means, but in previous roles, I used to get quite upset with managing the data because, everything gets kind of lumped together and, it's you want to get easy, actionable insights into your stock, your business.
By the way, that's my definition of AI. I don't want to call it AI. For artificial intelligence, I call it actionable insights.
Yes, and that's such a better way to describe it. And yeah, I mean, AI is a key thing that is creeping in. I had a dinner a few months ago with all these leaders of big brands like Nando's, Burger King, and stuff. And one of the things that's growing in popularity is voice AI, where
for the drive-through, they're using it. They're using it on kiosks now, but the hotel industry really led the way with that, with call centers because reservations.
Yes, and that's it. And that is one area where a human just can't compete because AI can speak multiple languages. AI doesn't take a vacation, and AI should come back with a decent answer, or at least go through some steps. Yeah,
it's getting here. So so you're saying that a tech peeve of sorts for you is that we still don't know what to do with all this data that we have. Although there is a solution to go figure it out. Are you like a tech junkie on the personal side?
A little bit. I mean, my wife is incredibly technical. She works in banking, so she just blows me away. So if I have a router problem at home, she just pushes me out, and she does it. So we get kind of a little bit pushy back and forth on who knows more tech, but I defer to her.
Do you cover the consumer tech as well?
Yes.
So what's your favorite thing going on in the consumer market that you think is going to impact the industry?
I like the Google Glasses, but I know that there's privacy.
The ones with NVIDIA on it, they're working with Samsung in there somewhere too, right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty nice tech.
I got to be careful about this because I'm really upset at Samsung this week. So, and by the way, I talk to Samsung all the time. It's okay, but I waited 5 years for the TriPhone. And it came out in January. I saw it was teased at CES, but I saw it 4 years ago at CES, and I've been waiting, right?
Yeah.
It came out. I couldn't get one right away. They stopped it 2 weeks ago, and it came out in January. Not because it was bad technology, but because the production cost of it and what they were selling it for. It's great technology, and it's but I do have on my list the glasses you're talking about, because I think that partnership with Google has all this data out there, which is a big deal, right? So if you have all that data and you can somehow share that data, and we're not talking about just a camera in the middle of a glass, right? But actually doing something with it, and you don't have to look dumb doing it, right? You don't look like a geek doing it. Just imagine all the things. And by the way, what starts on the glass ends up on the corneas, and things that they do. So we just start there, right? So I'm fascinated by that one too.
Yeah.
So where do you think that's going to go?
Wow. I mean, the big question is GDPR, which in Europe and the UK is...
when you want to do anything,
yes,
go ahead and bring up governance and bring up rules and regulations.
Yeah. But with that said, I mean, it's really exciting technology. And I mean, you can apply that to so many different things where, sticking to restaurants, if you want to be able to pair food with wine, or if you want to pull up information about the guest, if you can pull it up within your lenses, so it looks like you're not referencing a book or a tablet.
Absolutely.
You can just look straight at the guest and remind them what their favorite wine was, and remind them what the allergies are in the food that you're having. I mean, that can be great.
Well, the challenge on that one, so I get the privacy laws, which is really what we're talking about here. So there was that issue years ago when Facebook tried to put cameras. Some restaurants, Facebook didn't do it, but restaurants put a camera, and then they took as you're entering, your face, and they're looking on Facebook and looking on social media to figure out who you are. Well, that didn't last very long, right? They had that actually in drive-thrus too, where they were looking at cars and license plates. Okay, get that, because you can identify the person, right? Hotel industry always was doing it because they would look at the MAC addresses of phones, and even they didn't have to ask you to sign in like the restaurant guys did, because they already knew who you were. That was a miss on the restaurant side. But so we will deal with the privacy issues, and we will deal with all of the data, but I don't think people realize how much data there is about their preferences out there, even if you don't go ahead and identify the exact person, and you just do it on statistical data, height, build, sex, facial expressions, somewhere in there that all gets put together, and you can start to predict and build a model for what that person probably wants. Predictive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now people are measuring your emotional response. So like when you're looking through your feeds of whatever, Instagram, Facebook, what have you, it's tagging saying, he looked at this for 30 seconds, he looked at this for 5 seconds, and it just accumulates in the background. I mean, I can understand because they're trying to make their product more addictive, more
but voice too. So, even with products like Zoom or Teams or whatever, it will tell you how engaged people are by the tone of their voice, their inflections, what they're doing, but also how much they participate, right? I'm sure somebody could do that with this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Whether we're engaged or not. So, they do that as well. And you don't always have to do the face. You have the voice. You can, you can take the person out of it, I suppose, if you want, but there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of thoughts there. Well, look, I could see that there may be the makings of a conversation here somewhere. Maybe we should pull together the group of people here in the UK and have that conversation, just as everybody uses the word roundtable. We'll come up with a different word for it, but we'll have that conversation. So, look, it's been great getting a chance to have a conversation with you here and just explore some different areas out there. And I could see there'd be some other things we should probably talk about. And, so thank you for joining me on TechBytes.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So Rob Grimes with TechBytes and with William Connors, the technology and it'd be the international technology and systems manager for Starbucks, but actually a long history in the industry, starting with operations, and a conversation here at HT360, which is inside of HRC at the XL Center in London. And it's just been great getting a chance to talk with you a little bit.
No problem. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.